And say good afternoon to Sarah Radlow as we deal with the ultimate game of the AFLW season and our last AFLW show for the year. The season's gone pretty quickly, Sarah.
It has. It feels like it's flown by, especially now that we're at the grand final. Feels like just the other week we were talking about rounds 3 and 4.
Yeah, it does. Some awards since the end of the season. Most recently, Craig Starcevich, the Brisbane Lions head coach, winning the AFL Coaches Association AFLW Coach of the Year, a worthy award.
Yes, definitely a worthy award. I think he's been given the nod ahead of his fellow grand finalist coach as well, Matthew Clark, and he's definitely earned it. He seems to be one of those coaches that's really pushing the AFLW forward and supporting the girls in getting to be their best.
He's coached the Lions for the whole of their tenure in the sport. Win 122, lost 14, drawn 2. So that's not a bad record. And also this is the third grand final that Brisbane have been in. So he's kept them at a very reasonable level over his 5 seasons at the helm.
Definitely. And again, that level has become what we expected from the Brisbane Lions. After they've come back, especially from the expansion of the league. They were quite harmed by that in terms of players going to other clubs. They've still managed to stay a really dominant team the whole time.
And I'm sure that Craig would want to finish one better, given that he's got the runners-up medal twice. He'd be seeking to take the victory over Adelaide so that he can be a winning grand finalist coach.
Definitely. I think it's the thing that every coach wants on their resume, that final premiership at the end of the year. And it'd be a great way to finish off his 2021 season.
And Sports Fan Radio's own Mick Stanier, the coach of the Melbourne Demons, came in third.
Yes, he did. We love having Mick Stanier on as well. And it was great to see some great coaches being nominated and spoken about. There are so many amazing leaders in coaching coming up through the ranks, and especially in the next 5-10 years, I think we're going to see some really great female coaches coming through as well. Like we've already seen in Peter Searle, it's going to see a really great evolution of the game in terms of on and off the field personnel.
Well, that's one thing I was going to talk about. The top 3 are all males. The previous winners of the award, Trent Cooper from Fremantle, Daniel Harford from Carlton, all males. Time for a female, I think, to reach that upper echelon and get an award.
I think so. And we've seen so many people working hard to get up to that top spot. As I said, it's just going to be something that in the next 5-10 years, I think we're going to see some really great female coaches coming back on, especially with the assumption Beck Goddard is coaching Hawthorn's VFLW side. If they field an AFL side, Beck Goddard coming up to coach that just means we're going to see another great female coaching personality in the AFLW.
Well, I'll repeat my question that I asked you earlier in this series. Will Hawthorn be able to retain her, given the weight that Hawthorn might have to get into the competition?
It's really hard to say. I think they've definitely given her this role, telling her, when we field an AFLW side, we're calling you up to coach. You'd hope they're going to try and push as hard as they can to get her up there, but she'd also, I assume, be in the loop. So if she continues to sign on with the VFLW side and stay with them, she would have an awareness of the kind of timeline Hawthorn's going to be looking at. I think this year, depending on who's going to be introduced in the next couple of years, which we should find out soon, will definitely have a big impact in that decision for her.
Okay, some other awards that have been made. One that we haven't announced on this show previously, that's Kiara Bowers won the AFL Player of the Season award as voted on by the media. The Freo midfielder, she also was the winner of the Australian Football League Coaches Association Player of the Year and is, I would have thought, hot favourite for the W award next week.
Definitely. And we've spoken about that a little bit off the show, about the W Awards not being within the same week as the grand final. But I think that just means it's going to add a bit more tension to it. We're not too sure who's going to come out on top with this medal. And there's going to be some displays from some amazing players in this grand final that have had their names thrown around for the W award as well. But it looks like it's going to be going towards Kiara Bowers or even one of our other award winners, Bree Davey.
Well, and the MVP award, which has just recently been announced, Bree Davey from Collingwood won that by 6 votes from Kiara Bowers and Ellie Blackburn from the Western Bulldogs.
Yes, and she had an injury-free preseason setting her up this year as well, which is something that we haven't seen from her in a minute. But she pulled 319 votes, so she came out just on top of Kiara Bowers. She got 313.
Now, you mentioned the W Awards are next week. I don't understand the air. Surely the air has gone out of the season once the grand final is played. Can you imagine that happening in the AFL?
No, I can't. And I think it comes down to there's probably something that it's clashing with in the AFL or something outside of the calendar that's going to be affecting when they hold this event. Whilst it might be them trying to give the AFLW the opportunity to get a bit more screen time and have a bit more time towards themselves to focus on it a little bit, hype it up a little bit more off in the media, it just feels a bit more like it's clashing with something in the AFL, and the AFL said, no, you've got to move it this way, or they're just trying to fight to get their voice out and compete in competition with the AFL.
Well, suggestion to the AFL and the AFLW next year, put it in the week off between the preliminary final and the grand final, because that's a suggestion that we've both got as well, I believe.
Definitely. After finding out that Chelsea Randall is going to miss out on the grand final, and she's definitely a player that's deserved to go back into the big game, it would be amazing to see that week off to give players a bit more of an opportunity to rest up, take care of themselves, and also just a really good choice for all players involved. Chelsea Randall said after she had her concussion, she had a lot of people telling her, you know, why aren't you fighting this? Why aren't you going to different people, trying to get back into the game? But Chelsea also said that she wanted to be a good role model, especially to grassroots footballers, and show them that concussion is serious and it is deadly, which it is, and which is why she made the decision not to fight her concussion ban and not to play in the grand final.
And that's a huge out for Adelaide, Sarah. Dual premiership player, the captain, one of the better players in the team. Surely the AFL and the AFLW want the two best teams with the best players out on the ground when they're playing for the Premiership Cup.
They do. And I guess that's why we would suggest this week off in between the finals and the grand final, because it would see that players like Chelsea Randall would have that week to rest up and then be fit to go into the grand final. So hopefully something that we can look at not only in the AFLW, but in the AFL in future years.
All right, Sarah, you know I like to look at history. Last time these two teams met in round 4 in Brisbane, it was Adelaide by 12 points.
Yes, that's actually the margin I've tipped Adelaide to win by this weekend as well, coincidentally. It's going to be an interesting competition, especially as we've seen these teams come up against each other in a grand final before as well. We're just going to have to see how they go. There's going to be a lot of competition between some of their midfielders as well. Two of the best teams with the best midfields, I think, in the AFLW. It's going to be a tough competition.
Yes, Ebony Marinoff and Anne Hatchard for the Crows. Marinoff last week, 35 disposals, 13 tackles. Hatchard, 27 disposals, 1 goal. If you're getting that sort of production out of the engine room, then that goes a long way towards winning the game. Probably why Adelaide was so dominant over Melbourne last week.
Definitely. And the power of their midfields is just going to be, I think, the big decider in this one as well. They've got so many big names coming in through their forward as well. Dakota Davidson, Erin Phillips are going to have a really good game, I guess, in terms of goal scoring, seeing how they're going to go. But their midfields, I think, is what's going to be making the game. It's two really tough competitions coming into the game, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they go.
Erin Phillips can play anywhere, she was very damaging in the first half last week, kicking 2 goals. I'm thinking if I was the Brisbane coach, I'm sending Brisbane's best defender, Kate Lutkins, to play on her.
Yeah, you'd be thinking that maybe they're looking at playing a tag kind of game, trying to just shut her down. But Erin Phillips, again, as I think everyone knows in the AFL and AFLW community, is one of those players that you're really going to struggle to actually shut down and come out on top of. It's going to be a very tough competition for Brisbane, but I think their only way to really shut her down is to make sure there's always someone that's got an eye on her.
Now, Marinoff, I'm thinking best tagger probably in the league, Kathy Zvark, is sure to play on Marinoff. What are your thoughts?
I think so as well. With Ebony Marinoff's disposal rate, you can't let her go. She's going to make a really big impact in the game, getting something between 25 to 35 disposals in the majority of her games this year. You'd have to have a tagger on her as well, and just make sure that you're shutting her down and trying to limit her to disposals, even if it's the difference between her getting 20 disposals, which is still a lot, to 30 disposals. Any kind of impact you can have on the game in that sense will be the decision maker.
And Zvark has the ability to run off the player she's tagging and get her own disposals. So that's a bonus. My thoughts, if Brisbane have any chance in this game, then they've got to bring the same level of tackling that they did against Collingwood. 76 tackles they recorded in the preliminary final last week. They've got to bring that same intensity.
They do, and it's going to come down to a lot how these two teams fight against each other. As we were talking about on our Sunday show, I think it's going to turn into a massive mental game and how these girls can really fight on the field. It's the tackling rate from both sides has been impressive. Brisbane have done an outstanding job, and the forward pressure from Adelaide has always been something that they're very well known for, especially as they come through in their midfield. Finding their forwards just seems to be a very good talent of theirs, and their accuracy doesn't leave much to be wanted. So it's going to be a game to really tip off this season, I think. And especially after it's the first year that we haven't had that conference system and we're going into a grand final. It's a very well-matched grand final as well.
So, I also like X Factors. My Brisbane X Factor is Dakota Davidson, 3 goals last week.
Yes, an amazing player.
And providing Brisbane can get the ball to her, can be a very damaging player in the forward line. She needs to kick at least 3 goals, maybe more, if Brisbane will be successful.
Definitely. And I think she's going to be a player that Adelaide's keeping an eye on as well. Probably if Chelsea Randall had been in the game, they probably would have been sending her over to Dakota and making sure that she's shutting her down. But again, another one of the players of the day that's going to have to be kept an eye on, seeing how she goes. I think she'll be up there for first goal of the game. But if Adelaide play their cards right, I think she'll only be scoring 2 or 3.
Yeah, on my calculations, Davidson scored 19 goals already for the year. So that's a pretty reasonable tally and puts her amongst the dangerous forwards that are in the competition at the moment.
Definitely.
Almost like Chloe Malloy, just to throw a player in that you like.
Yes, I love a bit of Chloe Malloy. And it's another thing as well, Darcy Vesio. There's some really powerful forwards coming up in the competition, becoming some icons as well as they come in, fall a bit more into their teams, into their personalities. And as the AFLW game gets bigger, I think these girls are going to get bigger as well. As we've talked about the mullet, Karen Paxman, she's created her own identity for herself, not just outside of her haircut, but her talent on the field is outstanding. And her way of filling in with Melbourne where they need and really pushing through is something that I think every team finds admirable.
Yeah. What Adelaide will have to be careful of is in their efforts to try and stop Davidson from kicking goals, Courtney Hodder in the Brisbane forward line is very dangerous and a very good ground player. If they leave her unguarded, she might be the beneficiary of having a whole lot of balls to be able to kick goals with.
Pretty much. Courtney Hodder and Dakota Davidson are probably their two most dangerous players in their forward line. And again, it might just be something where the Adelaide backline are going to have a really good awareness of where these two girls are, because you could easily say these girls are going to be the difference between them scoring a bag to them scoring 1 or 2 against Adelaide.
And my X factor for Adelaide, Anne Hatchard. If Zvark goes to Marinoff, then I think Hatchard just gets more disposals than she did last week.
Pretty much. And Hatchard is another one of those players that for Adelaide have become such a big name player and really manages to hold herself up during her games, fighting for her position as well. She's always been a strong player, never been afraid to go into a contest, and is always one of the first girls there with the ball. It's another element of this game that's going to make it so much more intriguing and interesting to the viewers. And I think this year is a really good opportunity for the AFLW to capitalise on having such a well-matched game and get a few more viewers for the 2022 season.
Well, and especially when a game's played at 2 p.m. on a Saturday, although 1:30 p.m. local time in Adelaide.
Yes,
yeah.
That's all right. We're still looking in towards that window as well. And it's going to be a really good, as I said, an opportunity for the AFLW to spruik the game a little bit more and show off what these girls can do.
My selection, Adelaide by 20 points, which means the 7 players who have already played in 2 losing grand finals for Brisbane will now have 3 losing grand finals that they've played in.
Yes, I'm looking at Adelaide for 12 points. And I've had a little bit of a look at best on ground and where most disposals are going to be as well. I think we're going to see just another classic from Flip. We're going to see best on ground, Erin Phillips. Again, I think she's one of those players that's always eye-catching and is always going to be there to really show off and keep up the Adelaide grins, I guess, in the crowd. Most disposals, I think we're going to see Ebony Marinoff, as we spoke about before. Unless they shut her down, she's going to be looking at 25 to 30 disposals during the game. Most goals, I would say Erin Phillips, looking towards 3 or maybe even 4, depending on how the Adelaide backline compensates for her talent. But I think we are going to see the first goal from Dakota Davidson. I think that first bit of pressure from Brisbane is going to push it down to her, and in her good hands, they might see their goal.
Okay. Best on ground, I've got Hatchard.
Mm-hmm.
Most disposals, same, Hatchard. Most goals, Davidson. First goal, Hodder.
Interesting.
Off a spoil from Davidson.
Bit of teamwork in there. That's all right. Still a bit of an assist.
Well, we'll see how those tips and selections work out. We'll review them on Sports Fan Radio on Sunday. What we'll also review on Sunday, Sarah, is your predictions for how the ladder would finish at the end of the season, because we haven't reviewed that yet. Gelding, I'm sure, will be most interested in seeing how his Richmond Tigers went. Even though they didn't make the finals, they didn't finish on the bottom.
Exactly. Better than finishing on the bottom.
It is. So, all right, well, until Sports Fan Radio on Sunday, a very good afternoon.
Very good afternoon to you too.